So if I go all the way back to the beginning, I was born in Jamaica, and for those of you who don't know the island, I was born in a place called Clarendon, Frankfield. So if you went there today, you'd see quite a lot of subsistence farmers actually working the land. And I've always felt that farming was very, very much part of my DNA, as it were. But you all know the history, that during the 50s, people like my parents had the opportunity to come to this country, which in fact was a major entrepreneurial thing to do. I mean, sometimes it's forgotten that immigrants that leave their original country to come to countries like this to better their lives, that's a truly entrepreneurial thing that they did. In my parents' case, they had moved to Birmingham. Actually, is anyone in this room from Birmingham, by the way? Oh, shit. It's just that I'm normally pretty horrid about Birmingham because you did the right thing there, now, I'm from a place called Small Heath in Birmingham, so you could probably understand why I hate the bloody place. Because it's one of those classic inner city areas that is deprived of hope, opportunity, and there really isn't much sort of expected from the people who are brought up in that area. So I don't have any sort of fond memories at all about the part of Birmingham that I'm from. And I'm from a family of 11. And we lived in one of those classic 2 up, 2 down terrace houses, and we were extremely poor. And my father had an allotment, and it was my job as the oldest boy to look after this allotment. And in a sense, this allotment really became my oasis away from the misery that I was surrounded by. Now, this is very true, what I'm about to say, very, very true. I could remember at the age of 11, I made myself a promise that one day I would be a farmer. I'd like to have my own farm. I didn't know I was going to do it. It was a dream that I sort of planted into the back of my mind, and everything that I subsequently did was to try and get into a position to buy my own farm. Now, when I go around and I do talks like this around the country, one of the things I say to young people especially is that the most important thing is to have the courage to dream. You have to have the dream in the first place to help you actually get to where you want to get to, and that's one of the things I fundamentally believe in. And I'll tell you how I did it. Now, I went to what in those days they called them secondary modern. So I went to the local secondary modern school in Birmingham, and this school was as much of a shithole as the place that I was living in, actually. It was a pretty ghastly place. The teachers hated being there, their kids hated being there. It was a horrible place. And I was a pretty difficult student. And one of the reasons why I was quite a difficult student is that I'm dyslexic. And so you can imagine that in those days where there was actually no understanding of sort of dyslexia, if you couldn't read and write, you were really just regarded as being thick, and you had the mickey taken out of you. So I spent most of my time at school being in trouble with the headmaster, and my headmaster feeling that I was the sort of guy that would end up in prison. You know, a lot of kids that actually went to my school did end up in prison, so you know, that's probably why he thought that. So at 16, I left school without any qualifications at all. I could hardly read and write, and I wanted to get away from home. And because I didn't have any qualifications, the only thing that was really available to me was to join the army. But unfortunately, I joined the army with exactly the sort of attitude as I had in school. And for those of you who know anything about the army, they don't tolerate that sort of nonsense. So they sort of took about a year trying to sort of lick me into shape. One thing is being a black mouth, they get you seriously asking for trouble. So they tried to sort of discipline me, but after about a year I got kicked out. So I've got a dishonorable discharge to my name. And it was the right thing that happened to me because I would have been a crap soldier. I'm not the type of person that sort of can take orders. And I also think that if you are an entrepreneurial type, it's very, very difficult for you to sort of work to someone else's agenda. You don't want somebody questioning you when you're actually being told to do something in the army. So that's the sort of person that I was. So having been kicked out of the army, so I'm about 18. In those days, you could see that my life was a real failure. It was really going in the sort of direction that everybody had expected. And in those days, if you were a failure at everything, there was only one option left available to you. Absolutely one option left available. And I still think it's true for today as well. And believe it or not, that option was catering. I went to the local catering college in the West Midlands, in Halesowen, and studied to be a chef. And luckily, I really took to it. I actually loved the pressure and the work, and I sort of worked in a variety of restaurants and hotels in Birmingham. And this was the days before chefing was a glamorous profession to join. But what was really interesting is that as much as I enjoyed chefing, the promise that I lodged into the back of my mind was always nagging away at me and saying, well, listen, boy, if you want to buy your farm, you're going to have to get your arse in gear, because you know there's nobody to give it to you. You're going to have to get some money together to actually buy one. And at that time, there used to be a brilliant television documentary series on called 40 Minutes. They made social documentaries. And I used to love that series. And so I made an announcement to all of my family and friends is that I would like to go and work in television as a producer director. So they took one look at me and they just thought I was nuts, because A, I could hardly read and write, and B, television was very, very much the place for the Oxbridge types to go to. But I remember something that my father said to me, and I've tried to live my life on these two principles, and I fundamentally believe that they work. All you need to achieve anything you want in life, really believe this, all you need are these two things. The first thing is to be focused, to be absolutely ruthlessly focused. Whether you see any successful sports person, they're absolutely focused. Focus is a key thing. And the second thing, which is also equally as important, is to have a positive attitude. Because if you've got a positive attitude, things come your way. And you could never achieve anything that you want unless there are people around to help you achieve it. And therefore, people are more likely to help somebody that is positive rather than some miserable gets. I really believe that's quite important. So taking those words of advice from my father, and again, this is true, I got a copy of the Radio Times, very true this is, and I wrote to every single one of the producers and directors in Radio Times, every one of them. And not one of the bastards wrote back to me. So, and I still feel the pain some years on. So I just thought, well, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to pick up the phone and ring them. Not one of them would take my calls. If anybody had said they worked in television, whether they're a cleaner, security guard, I did everything I possibly could for that person to become my best friend. And after about 18 months, it paid off. Some girl took pity on me and took me into BBC Peppermill and introduced me to a guy that I'll always remember his name, a guy called Jock Gallagher. And he sat me down and he spoke to me for about an hour. And he says, look, you're not the sort of person we employ in television, because A, you don't have an education, and B, you've got a bit of an attitude problem. And he says, look, he may live to regret this, but he would give me a contract for 3 months as a runner and to see what happens. Now that man, A, being entrepreneurial, B, having that courage, gave me a break in television that lasted a very, very, very long time. So the key thing I think about all entrepreneurial types is that when the opportunity comes, seize it, and it's finding those people who have an entrepreneurial element about them. And it's not always these people who are quite flamboyant. Everybody, I believe, has an entrepreneurial element to their personality, because it's all about jeopardy, which is something I'm going to talk to you about later on, and it's all about taking a chance with a person. So he gave me a job as a runner. I then went on from being a runner to be a researcher, went on to be a producer-director. I worked in a variety of programs when I was at the BBC. And I was pretty famous for one particular program, and some of you may be old enough in this room to remember it, a program called the Food and Drink Program with Gina Goulden and Oz Clarke. I traveled the world making films about food and drink. And my boss at the time, you might know him actually, Peter Bazalgette, he was a guy who actually started the whole of the sort of celebrity chef culture. And I mean, one of the things that's fascinating about celebrity chefs, and we're talking about the likes of Gordon Ramsay, Anthony Thompson, Brian Turner, you name them. If you want to go into a different world, you go into those guys' kitchens, and it's run like a military machine. It is a real tough environment to be in. And my boss, Peter Bazalgette, knew that these chefs are the sort of guys that would take him outside to sort a problem out. And my boss knew that I was the sort of guy that would oblige. And so, so there's many stories I can tell you where I've had face-ups with Gordon Ramsay and Brian Taylor and stuff. So them to know that I'm the boss, and therefore I'm quite happy to go and have a punch-up with them. But those stories will have to be for another occasion. So as much as I loved working in the BBC, and I said I was there for about 10 years, again, the promise that I'd made to myself was always there nagging away, so I knew this was my chance. I had to do something to fulfill this dream. And so, well, I was working at the BBC, very, very comfortable, and I knew that actually the only way that I was going to really earn some serious money was to start up my own business. And everything that I knew I'd done to date was obviously I worked as a chef, I worked on food programs, I decided that I would start my own food and drink marketing agency. And I can remember this, and this is the thing that I think is amazing. I just had enough money to pay the mortgage for 3 months. The moment I decided I was going to start my own business, all I had was to pay, was 3 months money to pay, and then if I didn't, I had no clients, I had nothing. Just, this is what I wanted to do. Now, one of the things I find quite interesting about business is that lots of people have ideas of things they would love to do. They would absolutely love to go and do their own thing. And there's one thing, there's only one thing that stops them, and that one thing is fear. Fear of what may happen if it all goes wrong. Now there is an antidote to fear, only one antidote to fear, and that is passion. Whatever you're going to do, you have to be absolutely passionate about it, because the passion knocks all the hurdles out of the way. It drives you through all of the problems that you will face. And that's why I say to people is that if you're not passionate about it, don't touch it, because it's going to be a hell of a journey. And there's nothing that focuses the mind more than just having 3 months money to pay the mortgage. You work your socks off, you just focus on making sure that business works. And again, spotting those who are prepared to give you a break. And that for me is one of the skills about business, is that there are some real kind souls out there who are prepared to take a break with you. And every stage of my success has been down to silent individuals who've gone out of their way to give me a break. And you'd never be able to identify these people. You never think, Christ, that person's got an entrepreneurial streak about them. But those are the people that help people like us. So I started this business, and luckily it worked. Again, I found people who would give me a break. And also the decisions that I'd made. I decided that actually I'm going to do a food and drink marketing business, and it's no good me going to the big corporates for their business, like Coca-Cola or Cadbury, because they take one look at me and just think this guy is nuts, really, his arse. They just wouldn't work with somebody like me because they're process driven. And what I want to really be linked to are entrepreneurial types, people who've got a punch above their weight, who've really got an excitement about them. That's trying to get that fit to work. So the sort of clients that I had, that we were responsible for launching, are brands like Lloyd Grocery Sauces. A lot of people would not even today think that in its day, that brand revolutionized the whole sauces category. And what was fascinating about how and the things that I've always loved doing, is working with brands that want to challenge the status quo. And one of the things about being entrepreneurial is that you're always questioning the rules. Says who? Says why? Who says it has to be like this? And the Lloyd Grossman story is an interesting example. That when Lloyd came up with these sauces, one of the things it did was left this ring of oil at the top. And all the research came back and said, actually what we've got to do is get rid of that ring of oil because it's going to put people off. They put emulsifiers in just to sort of disguise it. And Lloyd, to his credit, said no. This is how it would look if it was made at home. This is what we'll do. And that actually changed the whole of that sort of category. The other brands that we work with are brands like Kettle Chips. Before Kettle Chips existed, the Walker's type sort of mushy things was what was deemed to be sort of crisp. But Kettle Chips came along and says, actually, why don't we just slice the potato and serve it? You look at the category now and people would never know that it wasn't around years ago. Other brands like Plymouth Gin taking on the might of Gordon's Gin. So those are the sort of brands that we worked with, and it's really exciting. Now I ran that business for 15 years, And it was only after running that business for 15 years, I then got the money to buy my farm. It took me 40 years from the moment that I had that dream to be in a position to buy my farm. So, you know, you've got to start bloody early because it does take a long time. Now, I bought my farm down in a place called Launceston, or Lanston is the way it's pronounced down there. I found a sort of neighbour from Tavistock. And when I bought my farm, it had been it was a dairy farm, and it had been in one family for about 200 years. And the farmer had enough. He had 2 daughters, and they just thought, we ain't going to be asked for this, actually. And so they decided they want to get out, and they sold me the farm. And then, when I bought this farm, I then started to invest money into it and tried to make it work better. And one of the things I found quite shocking when I bought this farm is that I then started to experience this massive gulf between urban and rural Britain. It was as though there were 2 countries. And there were certain things that I just didn't understand, and I just thought was unreasonable. And let me give you an example of that. One of the fastest growing brands in this country is a brand called the Fair Trade brand. And the whole concept behind the Fair Trade brand is you good people spend your hard-earned money knowing that that money is going back to help farmers in developing countries, which I think is really noble. But to try and get the British consumer to feel exactly the same about their own British farmer doesn't exist. It's just there is absolutely no relationship between the food producers in this country and the consumer. If you go to Ireland, if you go to Europe, there is a much, much better sort of connection. And the reason why there isn't that connection is because actually the supermarkets are the ones that dominate that relationship. So I thought I would like to do something about that, or that there was an opportunity. So what I know, obviously because of my marketing experience, is that if you get the consumer on side, you stand a chance to actually do a very successful business. So I decided that I was going to do a food product, and I was going to do a food product that was quite challenging and difficult to do. Most people, when they're going to do a food product, they will either come up with a jar of sauce, or they'll come up with a jam. And the reason why they do that is that you've got 18 months shelf life and a jar of sauce and jam. With something like a sausage, you've got 5 days to sell it or it ends up in the bin. And a lot of people don't actually go into that area because of those massive problems you actually come across. But me being me, decided that was the area that I wanted to go into. So I wanted to develop a really good premium sausage that I wanted to have a sausage that had the highest meat content on the market, because at that time, one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like sausages is because traditionally, butchers put all the shit end of the pig in, put some breadcrumbs in and sell it, and they're pretty disgusting things, and so that's why a lot of people didn't eat them. So I decided that I was going to have the highest meat content, and also I did some research that showed that 1 in 100 people have some sort of wheat intolerance, so I'm going to make sure that all of my products were gluten-free. And I spent a lot of money researching the whole concept of the sausages. And then it came to, what am I going to call it? So I just scratched my head thinking, well, what am I going to call this brand? And then one day it came to me. All of my next door neighbours used to call me the Black Farmer. And I thought, well shit, you know, that's a pretty good brand name. And not only is it a really good brand name, but there's no one else out there that could nick the idea. And not only is there no one else who can nick the idea, but it has jeopardy. That is a crucial fact, it has jeopardy. People look at that brand name and they go, they're not too sure about whether it's politically correct or not. They're not too sure about whether it's the sort of thing they should say. And what I wanted to do was to really copy the Richard Branson Virgin formula. It is hard to believe now that when Richard Branson launched the Virgin brand, using the word virgin in public was a very risque thing to do. People just thought this guy was sort of crossing the line. And the key thing about marketing and getting people's attention is jeopardy. So if you're reading a great book, if you're watching a wonderful film, even if you watch The X Factor, what they're always looking for is the jeopardy. All those formulas are about jeopardy. What is going to happen next? Because that is what's going to obviously keep the interest of the consumer. So obviously there's a shitload of jeopardy in the Black Farmer because people are just not sure, especially in our politically correct climate, about whether that's the right thing to say or not. So I decided that's what I was going to call it. The next thing to do was to try and get these products into the supermarkets. Now, everything that you hear and read about supermarkets are true. They're real bastards, a lot of them. They are absolutely awful. I took my sausages into them and said, look, tell them all the story, and it says that they're wonderful, got a really good price. None of them were interested. They weren't interested in listening at all. So, remember, I know the only people the supermarkets fear are the consumers. So I decided that what I would do is a roadshow, I'd go around the whole country, do a massive roadshow, giving out free samples of my sausages. And at the same time, on my website, and it's still there today, I'd have all of the buyers' names, their telephone numbers, their addresses, and I would say to people, if you really like these sausages, all I want you to do is do one favour, just email these buyers and say, why aren't you listing my products? And as God is my witness, that's how I got my listing, because the consumers really got behind the brand and really forced the supermarkets into listing these products. The Black Farmer brand is now 7 years old. We are the second largest premium sausage brand in the country. We will be number one by the end of the year, because we've just got a national listing with Waitrose. We not only do sausages, but we do bacon, we do chicken, we do meatballs, we do hamburgers, we do sauce, we do cheese. And so you could see why it's important that I tell you my backstory, because it's very easy now to look at a business that is a pretty successful business. We're about a £10 million business, a retail business, and still growing. And it's easy to look at that and not see the journey that one has to go on to actually to get to that place. One of the things I think is very, very important, and what I love doing, is to try and encourage young people to A, get into business, and also to understand that it really does come down to their own personal efforts. And to that extent, I run something called the Black Farmer Scholarship. And the idea is that they come down to my farm, and I will personally mentor them for about 5 weeks. And I go for the real scourge of society, people being in and out from the real problem ones, to really get them focused for 5 weeks, and hopefully they make use of this opportunity that I give. Some of them do, some of them don't. I'm a great believer that all you could ever do in life is give the opportunity, and it's down to the individual to decide what they do with it. But it's something that's very, very important to me, and it's something that I will continue doing. What I said earlier on is that when I started both of my business, I didn't know anything about business, and especially the procedures, the processes, dealing with account, did absolutely nothing about it. Now, the defunct Business Link was absolutely fantastic with me, and part of what they did, and this is what's important about your organisations, it's about finding people who've done business before, who understands it, to sort of help and steer you in the right direction. My enterprise advisor found my bank manager, found my accountant, found all of that support. Because I just think that if you're a bit of a rebel and you're a bit of a maverick, what you want is somebody who appreciates and understands that, but surrounds you with that support to help you on the journey that you're on. And I personally feel that support is very, very important, and I will definitely do whatever I can to make sure that organisations like yours are actually, like all of yours, seem to be very, very important for those who are starting up in business. I absolutely love business. I've also launched a clothing range for those of you who are looking for interesting rural wear. Go online soon and you'll see it there. And my next big venture is to launch a chain of restaurants called the Black Farmer Grill, where we will be selling sort of meat-based products. So watch this space, because that's the sort of thing that I'm going to do next. So thank you very, very much. And sorry I was late again, and I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. Thank you.